I know I am between you and a super exciting social hour, so I'm going to keep this light and easy and fun. It's not going to be as technical if you guys were in the last two sessions. It's going to be a little bit lighter material. This is a new concept, new industry here in Michigan. So I'm going to preface by saying the stuff that we're going to talk about today is as I know it on this day, at this moment in time. Tomorrow, next week, next month, all of these regulations and things I'm about to talk about may change just because it's such a changing industry. And those of you that were here with Andrew or Molly, they mentioned the same thing. So, and this is also the first time presenting in front of live people in 2 years. So show me a little bit of grace. I'm feeling a little bit nervous. I'm used to being in front of a screen. So thanks for listening to me. And feel free to ask questions, raise your hand, tell stories. I mean, edibles, right? How many of you? No, I'm kidding. Kidding. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit today about MDARD and the Food and Dairy Division. Most of you probably are very familiar with who we are and what we do, but I'll give you a real quick background. And then we're going to talk about the 3 different buckets of places where you'll find cannabis in consumable products. So industrial hemp in food, marijuana-infused edibles and beverages, and then where you may come across marijuana or industrial hemp in the world of food service. So MDARD Food and Dairy Division. So the Food and Dairy Division is responsible for the regulation of all the manufacturers, distributors, and retailers of food here in Michigan. Our mission is to protect the public health by ensuring a safe and wholesome food supply. And we have a team of food safety inspectors and everybody else involved at Food and Dairy Division that do routine inspections, licensing, investigations, complaint investigations. We do sampling, both product sampling, environmental sampling. We do outreach, education. Anything that has a hand in food here in the state of Michigan, Food and Dairy Division also has a hand in it. Our regulatory authority comes from the Michigan Food Law, and you're going to hear me talk about that a little bit later, so I wanted to mention that now. And the Food Law adopts by reference the Michigan Modified Food Code and all of the FDA's Code of Federal Regulations. Specifically, I'll mention the CFR 117, something else that you'll hear about a little bit more later. Most of my notes are on my slides here, so kind of winging it. So each physical location where food is sold or distributed must obtain a license here in Michigan. This kind of just talks about general requirements, things we look for in the world of food regulation. You guys are probably all familiar with that, so I'm going to skip right over that. So in 2018, we're going to talk about foods containing hemp. In 2018, the Farm Bill removed hemp from the definition of marijuana in the Controlled Substances Act. The Farm Bill also stated that the FDA has regulatory authority over the production, distribution, and sale of hemp. So here in Michigan, MDARD has adopted those same regulations, and we're going to use the same standards that the FDA does to regulate hemp. So we see consumable hemp and CBD products everywhere, but is it legal? The answer is, it depends. So the FDA has already identified and progressed 3 different food products through their GRAS process, and those products are lawful to be in consumable products. Any substance that is intentionally added to food is considered a food additive, and a food additive is subject to pre-market review and approval by the FDA, unless that substance is generally recognized among qualified experts as having been adequately shown to be safe under the conditions of its intended use. So that's the GRAS process. 3 different hemp seed-derived food products have been advanced through that process, and they include hulled hemp seeds, hemp seed protein powder, and hemp seed oil. So we're going to talk about those 3 items. Oh no. We've lost our battery. Sure. Can I turn this real quick so I can look at it a little bit more? Oh no. Don't turn it. Yep. Don't turn it. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So hulled hemp seeds, back on track, focus. Hulled hemp seeds are exactly what they sound like. They're whole hemp seeds without the shell. You'll often see these products in health food stores, some of your health food service type shops. They are packaged, they're shelf stable. They have a lot of health claims with them, like high in fiber, high in magnesium. You see them in things like granola, breads, baked goods. But this product is lawful to use and consume in the food industry, and it's regulated just like any other food product. So here in Michigan, it would be licensed and regulated just like any food product that you would see as an approved ingredient. Enter, maybe? It's the last presentation, right? Of course, it's going to go. Just do enter, okay. Hemp seed protein powder, another common one that you may see in the marketplace. It's made by grinding pressed hemp seeds into a really fine powder. Again, it's a niche market, right? A lot of our health food stores, the health food industry, you'll see it. It's fairly common. It's always prepackaged, and it's a shelf-stable product as well. And the last one is hemp seed oil. Hemp seed oil is not the same as CBD oil. So if you take anything else away from that, this presentation, remember that. If you see this in the marketplace, this is what you're looking for. Hemp seed oil is intended for cooking or as a food ingredient, and it's produced very similar to other oils that you'll see by cold pressing hemp seeds into something that looks like the photo on the left. It comes in cooking oil type packaging. If you find something that comes in a tincture or a droplet, more than likely it's not hemp seed oil. It's actually CBD oil. Even if they put on the front hemp oil, you might want to flip it over, go ahead and hit enter, and check the ingredients. So even on the back side, it says that it is one of the main ingredients is CBD. So pay attention to that. So let's talk about CBD, right? We see it everywhere. We see it at our local grocery stores. We see it at the gas stations, Family Video, or is that just down in Southeast Michigan? I don't know, but that's where they sell a lot of it. But CBD is not marijuana. It is technically under that 0.3% THC. And what else do we need to know about that? They obtain it by using the dried plant material and extracting the CBD compound out of it. And then it has a multitude of different uses. Go ahead. So can we put it in consumable products? And the answer is no. So let me check my notes here. Oh boy. So the answer is no right now. There's limited data on the safety of consumption of CBD and on the actual claims that people make for consuming it. So a lot of times there's a lot of health claims made that just really aren't founded or proven to be true scientifically just yet. There's also a lot of questions about the safety of manufacturing it. So on my last slide, I talked about how they extract the actual material, and they use a lot of dangerous equipment and methods of doing that. So just a lot of unknowns when it comes to obtaining CBD. One of the other reasons is that the FDA has only approved one CBD product as a prescription drug, and I say Epidiolex too, but Molly, I think, corrected me. And I already forgot how to say it, but there's one prescription drug out there that is used to treat seizures that contain CBD. And because they use that drug in a prescription form, you can't now add that to a food product. The addition of that known drug to a food or beverage would then make the food a drug. So we can't regulate that using the Michigan food law. Right now, the FDA understands that there is a huge lack in enforcement structure. So we treat the enforcement of CBD in the marketplace with discretion. So we're looking to make sure that they're not making any outrageous claims, that they're not marketing it to children or marketing it in a way that could be harmful, or making sure that we don't have any adverse reactions or reports of complaints. That's really how we're looking at enforcement of CBD in the marketplace. So like I mentioned, we see it everywhere in the market. It's not uncommon to see it on the shelves at your grocery stores, even making health claims on some of those bottles and boxes or online. But really right now, they should be marketing it as creams, balms, oils, non-consumable products, beauty care, skin care, and then really it's up to the consumer with what they choose to do with it once they take it home. But it should not be marketed as sold as consumable. So food inspection staff do come across it quite frequently. And like I mentioned, most jurisdictions use enforcement discretion. they prioritize it just like the FDA. So we have investigated some instances of adverse reactions. The FDA has sent warning letters to some firms that are marketing it, making crazy claims like cures autism or prevents heart disease, things like that. They do go after some of those firms, but at this point in time, the enforcement structure is just lacking for going after a lot of those manufacturers. Go ahead. So the next topic is something that's a little bit new. It's kind of outside of my lane, so I'm just going to touch on it, and if anyone has any comments or thoughts on it, we welcome some conversation. But hemp microgreens is something that's new to the industry and has popped up here in Michigan. So a lot of you are familiar with microgreens and sprouts, right? Something that we see in our grocery stores. They're consumed raw. They're added to salads, sandwiches, blended in juices, things like that. They're small. They're consumed right after sprouting, so you'll see them, an inch and a half when they harvest them. They harvest them right at substrate, so they're not a sprout. As we know, sprouts have a lot of food safety hazards that we've already identified. This is definitely a microgreen. We're harvesting at the substrate level, and they grow quickly. It's like a 14-day turnaround, so they're growing, harvesting, and repeating continuously. They're not regularly available in the marketplace yet. This slide might be a little bit old. They might be a little bit more regularly available now, but go ahead. There are some challenges with that. Luckily, where I'm at Food and Dairy Division, we have a partnering group that I work with called the Produce Safety Unit, and we've identified this product as obviously a ready-to-eat produce product. So we've kind of transferred the research and what we're doing to identify whether or not this is legal and safe over to her lap. So I can't really comment too much more about what she's done to regulate that. But it's still regulated as hemp. It should not have any THC and low levels of THC, less than 0.3%. The testing of it to make sure that it doesn't have THC in there is challenging. There's not a lot of research done so far, so it's really a new commodity that we need to just learn a lot more about. And one thing I found interesting as I was researching the microgreens is that the fibrous byproduct of industrial hemp is often used as a growing medium for the sprouts that we normally see in the marketplace. So when you go to your health food stores and they have wheatgrass and sunflower sprouts that you put in your smoothies and stuff, a lot of times that fibrous substrate that they use is actually made of industrial hemp. So lots of uses for that. Go ahead. So I kind of went through that a lot quickly. Like I said, I know you guys it's your last session of the day. Anything on CBD or industrial hemp? Any questions there before we get into actual edibles and infused beverages?
I've got one question about the microgreens. Are those considered a cut leafy green once they're cut?
No, because we're cutting it one cut at the substrate level.
Okay.
So good question, yeah. Anything else? All right, so marijuana infused edibles and beverages. So the next bucket where you may find cannabis product in something that many of you come across in your everyday work. So we know in 2016, Michigan's legislature passed a law to allow for medical use of marijuana. And then in 2018, voters updated the state law to allow for recreational use for adults. And that has created an entirely new regulated industry of marijuana-infused edibles and beverages here in Michigan. So do we consider it a food? What do you think? Do you think a infused gummy is a food or not? Yes, raise your hand. Maybe? No? Don't know? I don't know either, so go ahead. So is it a drug or is it a food? The federal government still considers marijuana a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act, as you may have heard earlier. So the addition of marijuana to a food product would render that product a drug in the opinion of MDARD. So the Michigan food law would technically not really apply. So how do we ensure that it's safe for consumption? As I mentioned earlier, our mission is to protect the public and ensure a safe food supply. And people are consuming edibles and infused beverages on the daily here in Michigan, and it's part of our role at MDARD is ensure it's safe. In comes the MRA. As today, it's the MRA, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, for those of you that haven't been in the last two sessions, soon to be the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. But they utilize a Rule 420 to ensure food safety. What? Why are you laughing? Is that a joke? No. So they use several different methods to ensure food safety under their own rule within their giant section of regulations. It has a specific section that talks about consumable marijuana products. So they have the authority to enforce Section 42403, which is very specific to edible marijuana products. It's not very long. It's a quick read. I encourage you to visit their website and take a look at their regulations and their bulletins. It's very informative, very easy to read. But again, it's not very long. It's not very detailed. It's no food code. How many of you use the food code every day? It's not 8 chapters. It's not anything like that, but it has enough information in there for us to go ahead and take a look at their food safety practices and the controls they have in place. Some things that they talk about in that section are labeling, ensuring THC concentration is appropriate, the ability to recall products if there's a problem. It specifically says that any food or beverage product that is produced has to be in compliance with 21 CFR 117, which is what I mentioned earlier, that the regulation that we use to ensure that the good manufacturing practices are in place at our food processing facilities. Whoops, one more. That's okay. Employee training, I think, was on there, and a few other things. So I don't have it memorized. So when it comes to food safety with edible cannabis, there are some known food safety hazards. So research over the last couple of years have identified the top 4 known hazards in cannabis consumption. So when we look at processing facilities, how many of you inspect food processing facilities? Anyone in a couple? Yeah, so when you look at a food processing facility, the first thing that you want to think about are what are the known hazards? If I'm going into a cereal manufacturer or a smoked fish manufacturer, what are the hazards that I need to think about before I walk in the door? And then I start my inspection, right? And try to go through that whole process and make sure that the facility has them addressed. So if you want to look at a edible processing facility, we want to know what those hazards are ahead of time. And research has shown already that aflatoxins on cannabis buds trigger mold growth. And that's a very common food safety hazard that we know about. Chemical residues on cannabis plants, pathogenic contamination from pests, like in the growing conditions, birds, mice, bugs, things like that. Pathogenic contamination due to improper employee handling. We all know about that, right? In the retail or processing world. Those are the top 4, and I added allergen control in the facility only because we all know that's a huge issue. It's always something that we're concerned about in processing facilities, and I've seen it firsthand in some of the edible inspections that I've done already. So how do we ensure food safety, right? We've already said that the Michigan food law doesn't really apply, so that doesn't give the Food and Dairy Division jurisdiction to go in, to conduct an inspection, to issue citations, to seize product. We don't really have that ability right now. So we've joined forces with the MRA and created a memo of understanding to provide inspection staff to go along with the regulatory officers of the MRA and conduct joint evaluations at the processing facilities. It's more of a consultative role. So we've, and I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we've established a cadre of about 10 food safety inspectors where their current role is much like many of you. They do food safety inspections daily at all of our licensees, but now we're adding on top of that, going out with the regulatory officers and conducting joint inspections at the processing facilities that manufacture infused edibles and infused beverages. They go out and perform an inspection basically they go out to do the inspection, but they're advising the MRA of conditions found to be unsafe for the production of food, referencing the applicable standard adopted by the MRA rule. And as I mentioned, the MRA rule adopted refers to CFR 117, so that's what we're using to advise them on whether or not the conditions are safe. So it's a consultative role. We're providing any information that we come across to the MRA agent, and then at the end of the day, they have the final say on issuing any citations or advancing any enforcement. This just started in the fall of 2021. It's a very new project, and like I said, every day it's changing. So we've only completed about a dozen joint inspections so far, but it's been very interesting, very, very interesting. Go ahead.
One question on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you go back or not. But it says on there that you go out to inspect to see if there's
You know, that's a tough one, right? That one gets everybody. What else? I mean, I could take the word food off there, right?
I understand, but
Yeah.
I understand the difficulty in this, but, you know, that's been my thing all along.
And it gets everybody, you know. A lot of times they'll say, well, if you consume a product, then it's food, right? But if you put a drug in it, then it's not food. But you're still consuming it. So you can see where we go back and forth. And, you know, probably the more correct terminology would be to say a marijuana-infused edible is really the more correct term to say on that. Yeah.
How many of those facilities are there in Michigan?
Facilities? I probably have a slide, I can pull them up. So, and I'll talk about it in a minute. The only MRA licensed facilities that can make edibles or beverages are the processors. So the MRA licensed processors will manufacture the edibles and beverages, and then they distribute to MRA licensed retailers. So the only places that we're inspecting are MRA licensed processors. And I don't know the number of that, maybe 172?
I thought it was lower, like, I think Andrew's presentation said like
123 maybe. And then there's also micro businesses that do all in one spot. So they may grow, harvest, process, extract, you know, the whole thing all in one spot. And only 8 of those, yeah, and I've only been to one, so.
Are your inspections complaint driven, where they're not licensed, but you get a complaint from somebody doing it, and then you go with MRA to justify it?
Yep, we haven't yet, but we will if we need to. Yep.
The violation that they would cite, basically your recommendation is the short list in 420.
Exactly. Yep. So they have one section under 42403 that would say they have to be in compliance with 117, period. So our advisory or our report that we would provide to them would give some detail and say, yes, under CFR 117 section whatever, this is what they weren't in compliance with, and then they would go ahead and take that information and proceed with enforcement. So, yep. Yeah.
And when you said MRA licensed retailers, are you meaning like dispensaries?
Yep. Yep.
So in order to open one, do they have to be MRA licensed?
To open.
Or to open like a dispensary? Like if somebody wants to do that, they have to get licensed first?
Yes, definitely. Yep. So an MRA retailer would be someone that retails any marijuana product, and it can be actual marijuana, bud, pre-rolls, vapes, all of that, or they would retail prepackaged, shelf-stable edibles or beverages. Yep. Okay. So like I said, we have a group of trained inspectors that are adding this to their already busy schedules. They're going out and doing routine inspections with some of the ROs. We meet routinely. We are constantly talking about how things are going and changing and providing training. And then we provide our observations, as we just talked about, in the form of a report to the MRA. And we have to make sure that our report would stand up in court. Just like any of our reports that we write every day, they need to make sure that they meet the expectations for evidentiary purposes. In addition to the routine inspection work, complaint investigations like we talked about, but we're also going to look at doing pre-licensing inspections and consultations, the actual licensing inspection if we need to, follow-up activity, product review, plan review, and enforcement support if needed. Go ahead. So talking a little bit about the types of facilities, so we talked about retailers a little bit and processors, so I'll back up a little bit, but only MRA licensed processors can manufacture edibles that contain marijuana. They can be adult use, medical use, or both. And some processors hold multiple licenses, so you may see the entire process from plant to harvest to extraction to, you know, the final gummy going out the door in a packaged format. Other facilities are smaller, and they may just receive the finished THC distillate or you know, whatever it may come in the form of, and they just add it as an ingredient. So they're making brownies, they add the THC distillate, bake them, and out the door. So it's really a wide variety of the types of facilities that they go into. And this is a link to that map on there, and that'll show you, you can toggle through all the different retailer locations, processors, micro businesses. It's a really good tool to use. So it leads to a vast difference in the types of operations that we go to, the size, the number of employees, the customers that you go to. It's a lot like our food establishments that MDARD, Food and Dairy Inspectors, are used to inspecting, but actually a whole lot different, right? So this is a facility down in Lenawee County. There's a lot of different challenges that we've come up with. The first couple of weeks that we were going out, it was just a whole different, we thought we've seen it all. Like I mentioned, food and dairy inspectors do a vast amount of things, cider inspections, breweries, infant formula, liquor stores. We have a whole different gauntlet of things that we look at, but this was definitely something new. So for me personally, I'll tell you a quick story. I went in to do mine, and it was super high security. I had to be checked in. They took all of my belongings. They took my photo. There was an armed guard that walked with me everywhere that I went. I had to wear a Tyvek suit. You have to go through like an airport security thing, but there's air blowers that blow any type of pests or dust or anything that would be on you. You go through a boot wash and in and out of every room. You're constantly on camera. It's a lot. It's more security and more, just more than I've ever had to go through in 20 years of being a food inspector. So that was surprising to me, I guess. Maybe it shouldn't have been, and maybe it wouldn't be surprising to you, but it definitely was an interesting experience. And in all my years, and even at Michigan State, the smell of the drying rooms was enough for me to not ever want to go back. It was rough, let me tell you. So it was very interesting. So our inspectors are definitely learning something new, and it's been exciting. So the challenges so far, aside from the smell of the drying rooms, have been scheduling. The MRA has a very strict schedule to abide by. They have very strict dates and times that they have to meet when it comes to routine inspections, 30-day licensing inspections. We have a little bit more leeway with our inspections with normal food staff, so it's been challenging to line that up, but we're working on that. Another one is ensuring approved sources in the field. So that, I'm sure, rings a bell with a lot of you. When you look at a food product, a new food product, you want to make sure it's coming from a licensed and inspected facility, or at least one that's in compliance with some sort of food safety regulation. The industry of marijuana and industrial hemp, it's a tight industry. They all talk with each other. They have a lot of things in common, so they like to use the same suppliers, the same resources. One guy may go to a convention like this and say, hey, I got a gelatin supplier down in Oklahoma. He's a really good guy. He can give you all the gelatin you need to make your gummies. Here's his number. And then the food inspector shows up and says, well, is he licensed? Is he regulated? How do we know that gelatin's safe? Where did it come from? Does it have allergies in it? And the marijuana processor is like, I have no idea. My buddy gave me his card and he's from Oklahoma. So how do we figure out here in Michigan that producer down in Oklahoma is producing a safe product and then selling it to all of these edible manufacturers here in Michigan? So that's been challenging, but we're figuring it out. Labeling, we're used to seeing food labels. The labels on marijuana products are just different. So getting our food inspectors to kind of broaden their horizons, understand the labeling of marijuana-infused products a little bit more. Some training there has been a challenge. Reviewing non-conventional foods. So in a marijuana processing facility that makes edibles, you may think right away gummies, chocolates, brownies, those are the common things, but they also make things like capsules, breath sprays, little droplets that you put in your drinks, tinctures, syrups, a lot of different things that in the food world we may look at and say, that's not a food. Put my blinder on, right? I'm headed to the salad bar. I'm not looking at whatever that is there. Well, in this understanding, in this agreement between MDART and MRA, we're looking at all things that are consumable to make sure that they've been made safely. So that if you go to your dispensary and pick up a breath spray, has it been made safely? Have they been using good manufacturing practices to ensure that I can consume that without worry? So getting our food inspectors to look at all of the products that are consumable within a processor and not just ones that you're used to seeing, like brownies and gummies and things. The firms, obviously, this is a big one. Firms wanting to render foods non-TCS. Luckily, we've been able to kind of steer them in the right direction so far, and we haven't had too many issues, but the regulation does say that all infused edibles and beverages must be non-temperature controlled for safety, right? So not a refrigerated product, not a frozen product, or need to be held hot for any reason, but they have to be shelf stable. But it doesn't say that you can't render a product shelf stable and then sell it. So if I take, can I make pickles and put THC in there and acidify them, make them shelf stable and sell it that way? Can I make beef jerky and put THC in it and render it shelf stable and sell it that way? The regulation says yes, but the MRA doesn't really have a lot of knowledge about how to render a piece of meat shelf stable, right? So luckily, we've been able to steer them away, so far, but it's coming. I can't imagine that, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're not going to jump on board with how the other states are doing it, and they're going to want to be able to manufacture some foods that are rendered shelf stable. So, but right now, we're kind of still lucky, I guess. And then just being unfamiliar with food establishment requirements, some of the firms, it's just a new world to them. We've been pleasantly surprised with a lot of the processors have been in compliance really well. Not a lot of issues, but obviously there's some that are just getting into the business and it's a whole new world to them. So getting some training out there. We have had a couple of investigations of consumer complaints of adverse reactions, like I mentioned, and luckily we've been able to solve those issues fairly easily. All right, so what about food service? How many of you inspect restaurants? Yes, so this is the part you've been waiting for, right? I should have led with this one. Perfect, go ahead. All right, so edibles in the food service industry. So there are barriers in place to prevent the commingling of marijuana sales and food service activities. These are straight from the regulation. So a marijuana business shall be partitioned from any other marijuana business or activity, any other business, or any other dwelling. So there, right there tells you if I'm a licensed marijuana retailer, processor, whatever the other licenses are, you have to be completely separate from any other business, and that would include a restaurant, a grocery store, liquor store, anything else. The second part of the regulation says a marijuana business shall not allow on-site or as part of the business the sale, consumption, or serving of food, except as otherwise noted. And we're going to talk about those two exceptions next. What about a food truck? How many of you have seen a food truck out and about, maybe at a marijuana location? Yeah, right? That's a big thing. So the answer to that one's yes. MRA is a little bit lenient on that. So as long as it doesn't have anything to do with the actual property of the licensed, the MRA licensee, they do allow for a food truck, say, in the parking lot. Within good reason, they use a common sense approach. Food trucks are allowed to be in the parking lot. So that may be an instance where you need to issue a temporary food establishment license, or maybe your STFU is operating out there. That does happen. How about food donations? Can I have like a bunch of frozen turkeys in the parking lot at Christmas time outside of my dispensary? That has happened. They did ask for that. You guys are looking at me like I'm crazy, right? These facilities, they want to be welcomed in their community, right? There's a little bit of a stigma with marijuana dispensaries, and they want to make sure that they're trying to overcome that. So we have had questions come in where they want to be, show that they're a good part of the community and they want to help out. So hey, with every 5 pre-rolls, you get a free turkey, right? So the answer to that one was, we don't know. That one's tricky. So at the end of the day, we said probably. It's probably not a big deal. As long as it's handled safely, we would kind of treat it the same way as any other food donation. But I anticipate we'll have to have some sort of, something in writing that'll kind of give us a little bit more direction on that. So where can we serve food? What if I am a restaurant inspector, I'm a sanitarian, and I'm worrying about places that serve food and licensing them? The first one is the designated consumption establishment, and that is a license that someone can apply for, and they can have a commercial space that's licensed by the MRA and authorized to permit adults to consume marijuana products on site. It's a 1-year license, it's renewable annually, but it's BYOB, bring your own bud. And that includes edibles. So you can bring any type of, smoke, vape, bring your own edibles, and food and beverage sales are allowed on site if approved by the appropriate regulatory authority. If you were in the last session, Andrew said they just approved the first one today, and I'm very curious to find out what county that's in, because that may impact someone in this room, I don't know. Do you know? Is it in Troy? Okay. Oakland? Who's in Oakland? Oh, of course it's Oakland, all right. But that would be an interesting concept, right? So maybe they want to, if it's right next to a retailer, that makes sense. They go over to the retail, MRA retailer, they grab what they want, they bring it over to the designated consumption site, and that place probably is going to want to serve food. I can imagine they can make some money off of some walking tacos. I don't know, but that may be an instance where the sanitarian may have to come in and issue a license. So something to think about there. That's probably it for that one. And then the other one is going to be the temporary marijuana event. And yes, COVID absolutely derailed the idea of this, but I anticipate some lawful ones will start happening soon. There were some unlawful ones happening that we caught wind of, but actual licensed ones, I'm sure those are going to be up and coming. And you're going to get a lot of applications for either TFEs on site that want to operate, or you're going to get notice that your STFUs are there. So that would be another instance where the sanitarians may be involved with food being served on site. So a temporary marijuana event, just to recap, a state license held by a marijuana event organizer for an event where the on-site sale or consumption of marijuana products or both are authorized. So licensed MRA retailers come to a temporary event and sell their product. So they can sell actual marijuana, bud, pre-roll vapes, all that kind of stuff. And then they also can sell the prepackaged edibles and beverages. That's what you would see happening at the event. Unlawful activities would be adding marijuana to products on site and serving. That would not be allowed, so keep that in mind. I already said that. Conventional food service is allowed again if approved by local regulatory authorities, so that's where you guys might come in. Go ahead.
Make sure one thing's clear,
Yeah.
I may have mentioned before, but the smoking issue is because it's not considered tobacco, is out the window if you're smoking in an enclosed area or at a food service establishment. I mean, if they're serving food in one of these consumption places, that's a food service establishment as well, right?
Right, so you're saying the actual smoking of marijuana in the food service.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes in a place like that, according to, I mean.
So as far as I know, the air smoke, yes, that one only talks about tobacco. It does not include marijuana. So that's a slight caveat that they're going to have to relook at for sure. And then I guess the other question, which I'm sure you're all thinking, is, so say this is a designated consumption site that we were talking about 2 slides ago, and they're serving food there, and it's open for a year, am I going to go ahead and issue them a retail food license? Or are they going to have a food service license then, and now they're just part of our routine inspections? Or in your jurisdiction, do you say, no, we're just not doing that. We're not going to allow, I don't even know if you can, what your rules are within your counties, but that's something that you'll probably want to start thinking about. Although I don't know that they're going to gain much traction either. As Andrew said in the last presentation, they're just really not that popular. They don't make a lot of money. Unless they can figure out a way to market them a little bit better, that might happen. So, good question. And then this is the last one, and this one I just find super interesting. They definitely fly under the radar. Many of you may be more familiar with them than I am, but I think they're quite interesting. This is cannabis and catering. So an event, I'm gonna tell you what it is first if you don't know. So you can go online, there's the weed maps, right? Is that the one that we use, the weed map finder? Where you can, they actually use that, well they say that one's a little bit better than the MRA one, but you can go on there and find all your local dispensaries and where to find weed in your area, type in your zip code. But you can also find people that will come to your home and make you a whole 7-course dinner with infused products. And this is, I'm not talking gummies and brownies, this is like lamb chops and you name it. They do all kinds of wonderful meals. So it's a private chef, essentially, that comes to your home and makes an infused dinner for you. So very interesting. It's still, it definitely flies under the radar, but MRA and MSP are aware of it. When it's a private residence, we kind of really don't get involved, right? No one's knocking on doors to see if you're making infused cake or something at the end of the day. But when you advertise it as a catering business, it's a little bit different. So any event where people are charged fees to enter and consume marijuana products, including THC foods, are illegal if it's a non-residential facility. okay? So that's how the MRA and the MSP look at it. So
If it's public, it's considered public then.
considered public, sure. They say non-residential is what their terminology is, okay? So non-residential, and if you're paying to come in and consume marijuana products, including THC infused foods, it's illegal if you don't have any type of MRA licensing, which you probably wouldn't, and those actually get referred right to MSP, to Michigan State Police. So we sometimes have told MRA about them, but they go ahead and refer them right to MSP. So there's a handful of websites that are still up and running and a lot of newspaper articles that you can find on these type of businesses, and just something to think about. It's something that could, 2 years from now we say, actually, you know what, that's a good idea. We want to encourage that business here in Michigan. So, hey, health departments, you got to figure out how to license and inspect these catering companies, right? So I thought that was an interesting subject. So, okay, I'm going to quit right there.